It's 9:31. I think we can start. Good morning, everyone, to this UBC Talks webinar on revitalizing urban space. This webinar is a series of webinars organized by the Union of the Baltic Cities, Sustainable Cities Commission. And my name is Agnieszka Ilola, and I am extremely happy to be your moderator today. Exceptionally, today our webinar is hosted by two commissions from our network, Union of the Baltic Cities, the Sustainable Cities Commission and Planning Cities Commission. First, perhaps a couple of words about our network. So Union of the Baltic Cities is a leading network of cities and municipalities from the Baltic Sea region, established already 30 years ago to work together and to share our member cities' joint potential for tackling challenges and promoting the local achievements and solutions related to social, economic, and environmental development of urban areas. We have today over 70 member cities from 9 countries around the Baltic Sea region, and we work through 8 thematic commissions focusing on various aspects of sustainable development, sustainability, urban planning, youth, health, culture, also safety, education, and business. And today you will be meeting 2 commissions, Sustainable Cities Commission. We focus on environmental aspects of urban sustainability and support cities' work in promoting clean, green and resilient urban development. We do the networking and exchange between our member cities to provide them a space for discussions, for exchange of best practices. We also provide the inputs to regional policy development, try to bring the voices of our member cities to regional policy making. And we do have also an experience in implementing and developing international projects for improving the environmental aspects in their cities, communities. As I mentioned, we are working on various aspects of urban sustainability as a whole network. And the topics that have been identified for our strategic vision until 2030 are based on real city needs and those themes that cities thought important to focus on in their work in the future years and the years to come. And therefore, together with member cities, we discuss on the topics related to sustainable water management and protection of the Baltic Sea. We also strongly develop the plans on sustainable mobility in our cities. We work on green energy and green energy solutions. We look into biodiversity topic as the biodiversity and greening plans in the cities are very important, and also resource efficiency, because of course our environment is very often very fragile ecosystem, which needs very careful approach and attention to how we manage the natural resources in a sustainable way, ensuring the access to resources for our future generations. So in today's UBC Talks webinars, we are going to focus in particular on urban planning and how to revitalize our urban spaces, taking into account various important dimensions, environmental dimensions, as I mentioned, the mobility, water, and all other important aspects of urban planning. This format is well known for those that have been with us already previously. It's a series of talks on various aspects, and we very much encourage you to follow our website and our social media, Facebook and Twitter, to see what are we focusing on in our discussions over the time. Coming back to this UBC Talks webinar, this is, as I mentioned, a joint effort of UBC Planning and Sustainable Cities commissions, and we decided to organize this webinar in connection to our very important annual meeting that will be organized on 13th, 15th September here in Turku. I'm broadcasting in this from the city of Turku in Finland, who is hosting the Sustainable Cities Commission Secretariat. And we warmly welcome you to, and your expertise, to come also to Turku to discuss and exchange on the aspects related to revitalizing a very concrete areas of the city of Turku, and to help us together to discuss and to shape the district of the city of Turku related to the waterfronts connected to the sea, to see how we can build a better environment for our citizens, and also how to improve already existing districts that would serve for building vibrant communities, to reinforce our local economy, and also how to make our public space more green and connected. So warmly welcome to the Commission meeting in Turku, and in a few minutes you will hear a little bit more from our colleagues from Turku, also from Gdynia, from Planning Cities Commission, on some ideas how to revitalize the urban spaces. So without further ado, on the practicalities, I will just tell, and before going to the agenda, I will just tell that this webinar is being recorded, so it will be also available on our website, ubc/sustainable.net. There you can find presentations from this webinar, as well as the recording. And you as attendees, you all are muted, but we would like very much to hear questions and to see interactions with you. So please use the Q&A box for communicating with us and asking the questions to our speaker. We will pose the questions after every presentation. And our team from the UBC Sustainable Cities Commission here behind is, yes, myself, Agnieszka Ilola. I'm the Deputy Head of the Secretariat in the Commission, and we have Communication Coordinator Maria Andreeva helping us with technicalities. Starting with the agenda, we will have today 4 presentations from 4 cities. Representatives from Turku will share the presentation and their vision as a background for our Commission meeting on the areas that will be discussed in the Commission meeting in Turku, areas that we will be planning for making them more green, more resilient, more connected from the both urban planning perspective, also environmental perspective. We will hear also presentation from Gdynia, the city that is connected, very strongly connected to the sea, how they are looking into the their waterfront and their urban plans for the specific areas. We'll have a presentation from Riga on the street design manual, so some tools for you to use in your urban planning. And our last but not least presentation, important presentation on social aspects of sustainability in sustainable urban planning and development of the city of Umeå. So I would like to now give a floor to perhaps our co-organizer of the webinar, to Paulina Szewczyk, who is the Deputy Director of the City Planning Office in Gdynia and also Chairman of the Planning Cities Commission of the Union of the Baltic Cities, just to tell you a couple of words, also welcome words about the Planning Cities Commission. So Paulina, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much, Agnieszka. Good morning, dear colleagues and friends around the Baltic Sea. Well, just a few words about Planning Cities Commission, about our working method very shortly, to invite you to the seminar in Turku that we are going to co-organize in September this year. My dear colleagues, we work like that. First day you come to the city, to the host city, to learn about this city and to learn about urban challenges in this city. We, colleagues, architects, urban planners, and other professionals connected with improving the quality of life, improving the quality of space in the cities, in the UBC member cities. We come to Turku this year. We are getting introduced during the first day to the problematic area, to the task area, to the challenges. We are visiting them. We are walking them, feeling, smelling, watching, learning it. Then we are having very, very hot discussions and first ideas. The next day, we are working together, drawing a concept, writing ideas, brainstorming. We are, during the practical work, we are exchanging our experiences so we can this way create a platform of interchange of our ideas, our experiences from our home cities. And then we create a concept, we create a presentation, and during the last day, we are presenting our results to the wider audience. So we leave the expertise to the host city. This time, this year, we will give the expertise to the city of Turku. We are very looking forward to meet you all during this seminar. We are really eager to work together, and we are very enthusiastic to meet in September in beautiful Turku. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Paulina. And yes, we are waiting for you eagerly here. Definitely, we do our best to mobilize our local expertise. But as we mentioned, we also look forward to other experts from the Baltic Sea region, as this is also a joint exercise, and not only very much, of course, it will be very hands-on, localized here as an kind of very concrete example of the areas and districts, but what we are going to discuss is very also universal principles and challenges that cities do have with densifying areas, with revitalizing post-industrial areas, with connecting the suburbs with the center, making the areas exactly more viable and vibrant for citizens to live in. So we are sure that definitely all participants will find something to exactly learn from and to bring back home. Okay. Thank you very much as well, Paulina, for that. And I will invite now our host as well from the city of Turku, Anna-Leena Jokinen, urban planning architect, to tell us a little bit exactly what districts we are going to work on in Turku, as well as what challenges Turku does have with the revitalizing the urban space, and also maybe some successful solutions to already now promote. Let's look and dive into the Turku experience and see what's awaiting there and try to bring more ideas to the table. Anna-Leena, I give the mic to you.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Agnieszka. And greetings from Turku, also from me. I'm Anna-Leena Jokinen, one of the city planning architects here in Turku. So as we heard, UBC Planning Cities and Sustainable Cities Commissions are organizing a joint seminar here in mid-September this year. And Turku is actively working on revitalizing areas with potential, brownfield areas, etc., around the city, particularly focusing on opening and activating the waterfront for people. The base for this PowerPoint presentation are the PowerPoints of our Director of Urban Planning, Mr. Timo Hintsanen. I give thanks to him for the beautiful pictures. Today I'll speak a bit about the urban development here in Turku overall and in the task areas of the seminar. So hopefully you can get an idea of what is awaiting the participants here who come to the seminar, and hopefully you can get an overview about the task areas and why they have been chosen. Turku will celebrate its 800 years in 2029. So originally, the town had a medieval city structure. But in 1827, the city on both sides of the river was burned in the Great Fire of Turku. And so, 1 year later, architect Carl Ludwig Engel made a new grid plan for the city, leaving the hilltops as you see out of the grid cleverly. The plan emphasized fire prevention, which was important for a wooden town. That plan still is the basis for the current structure of the city center. The population in Turku is now a bit less than 200,000, and it is expected to grow so that it will reach 250,000 by the year 2050. In regional cooperation, part of the population increase has been allocated to coastal areas that are currently in port and industrial use. Here you see the red lines showing the Turku and the neighboring cities and communities. Turku is a city of river and sea, as many of the cities around the Baltic Sea are. And originally, city of Turku grew along the river. Events developed the city also. Turku has hosted the tall ships races in Aurajoki River already 4 times, the next time being in 2024, together with Klaipėda, Tallinn, Mariehamn in Åland, and a Polish city whose name unfortunately I can't yet pronounce, but hopefully I learn it. And as Turku is thinking about the waterfront development, the first part of it has naturally started in the city center along the river. There has been done a vision work for the liveliness of the city center, and in that vision there have been suggestions for riverside development. Here on the left you see the existing theater house, and all other buildings and structures along the river are envisioned in that vision work. More advanced plans is this city plan that makes it possible to build an outdoor swimming pool in Aurajoki River, and another city plan for a new concert hall right next to the outdoor swimming pool, with the views to the cathedral from the roof terrace. Although Turku is located by the sea here isn't the vast open space that you might think about when you think about the word sea. In front of Turku, there is an archipelago of 40,000 islands and islets. And the archipelago protects Turku against the sea winds, but it also diminishes the seaside feeling in the city. But now Turku has directed its sights to developing the seaside areas also. As first, the harbor area next to Turku Castle. You can see the castle as a little structure behind the big ferries there. We have organized an international ideas competition for Linnanniemi, the Cape of the Castle. In the middle, there's the castle and the park, and on both sides was the competition area. Here you see the winning competition, 3 pieces. In part of that competition area, shown here by the arrow, will be arranged another competition, this time for the Museum of History and Future. And the competition will start this September. In Linnanniemi area was arranged also the competition for a new ferry terminal quite close to the castle, as you can see. Today the area around the castle isn't the most beautiful area. It's a bit messed up and mixed up harbor area. There's also the wish to plan housing close to the river or to the sea. Sorry, I'm going in the wrong direction. The former prison area, Kakola, on a hill close to Aurajoki River, has already been converted to a residential area. And the former military base has been planned as a residential area called Pihlajaniemi. On the other side of the strait, from both Linnanniemi and Pihlajaniemi, is the island Hirvensalo, whose shore areas have been envisioned as a residential area for the 2050s. Also on the coastal area, yet a bit more to the west, the vision work for Western Turku is starting this year. There will be made a maritime vision for Turku. And the hope is that in the future, the shore areas that are presently used as industrial or port areas would evolve into areas that could be in active use of the residents and visitors. currently there is really no access to the seashore in this area. The goals for the maritime vision are set in the so-called Meyer program. There will be drawn up a vision for the development of maritime Turku, especially for the area of Western Turku. The aim is to improve living comfort and increase housing and the maritime character. Turku also aims to be carbon neutral by its anniversary in 2029. And public transport is naturally an integral part of the city development. Turku is planning for a new and modern tramway. The previous one was demolished in the 1970s. This map shows with a green line the first phase of the tram. It would run from the harbor through the city center and a science park to Varissuo residential area. With the blue dotted line, you can see the idea of the tramway branching towards Western Turku. This idea has been brought up now when the vision work is starting. And there is also an idea of using the old existing rail lines that you can see maybe with the gray lines on the map, using then them as commuter rail service. And you can see the Lila point there, and that would be on one of our task sites of the seminar in Artukainen. And that trail would connect Artukainen to city center of Turku and to the neighboring cities. And here you see the railway line better to the task site 1. And the aim with the rail line would be, of course, to increase and make better the quality of life in that area as well by connecting it to the city center more in a better way. And this is the task area of Artukainen more precisely. And for this task site number 2, there was envisioned that the tram line would continue here in the future. I'll show you also the smaller task areas that are in the city center. They are located on the west bank of Aurajoki River. And Aurajoki Riverside is a popular leisure area around the year. And the part of the riverside from the bridge Martinsilta towards the harbor is known for its industrial history. But the area has gone through a significant change since the 1990s, and the change is still going on. In the future, the aim is to develop high quality cycling lanes on the adjacent Linnankatu street and provide more room for pedestrians on the riverside walk. So the Western Riverside has a great potential for development regarding the walkability and places for leisure, places to stop and rest, and organizing different activities and making the area more green, diminishing the parking that is there nowadays. But thank you very much for listening. I hope to see you in Turku, the oldest city here in Finland. Welcome and thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna-Leena, for the introduction. And as the citizen of the city of Turku, definitely I can say that I like very much the plans, how the riverside, riverfront and seafront looks. They are changing really significantly. Hopefully those plans will be eventually implemented as well. I was checking, we don't have actually the question to you directly, but I would have perhaps, so I encourage once again all our participants to pose the questions. And maybe one question from my side, those plans are really ambitious, very interesting you have. It looks like there is quite a many dimensions we will be working on. There was strong cultural aspect with building the museum and the harbor area, of course, with castle itself, with the strong cultural background, social dimension and improving the quality of life of citizens. As you said, you would like to increase the space for walking for pedestrians, but also connecting the areas to the center, so mobility aspects there. And again, at the end, we have also one area with strong industrial history, which you want to turn into modern housing areas. How in all those districts, I'm interested, how did you got those ideas? You were saying that, of course, it was based on the ideas, architect planning and so on, but how strong you close you work with the citizens, how much citizens were involved in the planning, in your plans that you have until recent? Do you have a specific tools how you involve? Have you been already asking the citizens of the certain areas what they would like to actually have there? How do they see the space rebuilt?
Thank you for the question. There is, of course, lots of discussions with the citizens, and one big wish from those citizens living in that western part of Turku is that they would wish to get to the seaside, because the port and the industry blocks the way. It takes all the space, and we have been trying to organize that, but that has really been difficult and it hasn't been a success. So that's why we would we hope someday that the situation will change. We know that that change won't come very soon, but now Timo Hintsanen, who I mentioned earlier, who is like organizing these vision works always, he has started discussing with the firms and companies located in that area. So maybe, and he has been telling that Turku is doing this vision work for the future, and maybe that way we could also find a way to organize something for the not so far future, but for the coming years, like for the people. But that has been a very important thing for a long time for those people living quite close to the sea, but never getting to the sea. So, but
Indeed.
of course, the discussion with the inhabitants should be constant, and of course there is always room for more. and we maybe this seminar also could be one way to raise discussion about these areas in particular.
And to see also how other cities are addressing and discussing with their different stakeholders group in co-creation of certain districts. I think that's definitely very important topic we will be discussing and sharing with other cities in autumn. I think many cities do have good practices, some experiences and tools. How do they really exactly engage their citizens, their different target groups in the planning? So I hope, yes, we will be sharing and get even more experiences to Turku, so you will be able to exchange with the stakeholders and get even more of them to this co-creation process. So the areas are really made for purpose. Thank you so much, Anna-Leena. I think I don't see any more questions. So let's move to our another speaker. We have now another city. We have Gdynia. Welcome again, Paulina, to tell a bit about Gdynia Sea City and how do you revitalize the waterfronts in Gdynia? Especially, we know you have also quite close connection, also a coastal city. So the mic is your, Paulina.
Thank you very much. I will share my screen. I hope, can you see the presentation?
Yes, now it's in presentation mode and we can hear you well.
Okay, well, everything is fine. Well, thank you very much. Yes, today I would like to tell you a few words about how we are revitalizing the waterfront in the city of Gdynia. First of all, some facts and trivia. Gdynia is located in the north part of Poland. Together with Gdańsk and Sopot, it forms three-city agglomeration. It's located at the seaside with direct access to the Baltic Sea. Gdynia has a population of, as you can see, 243 over 1,000 inhabitants. What's very important, 89% of Gdynia's residents are satisfied of living in the city. We have quite low unemployment rate. Gdynia is a great place for business, sea industry, with sea and port character. But while we are talking about revitalizing the waterfront in Gdynia today, I should start with a little bit history and actually of history, how this waterfront was actually shaped. Here you can see the coastline in 1924, when the city of Gdynia was a fishing village, small fishing village, with very ambitious plans of the state government to build the one and only port in Poland, because the city of Gdańsk was that days the free city. Those plans were ambitious, of course, and today, after these years, we can see the same coastline and completely different situation. But how we got to this point? Of course, when it was decided to build the port, parallelly, the first city development drafts were created, were elaborated. And here with the blue line, you could see the first border between port and the city from 1929. But soon it appeared that the port needed more space, needed more space. So the plans for the development plans of the city has to be changed. The idea was to build the city with 5, 6, maybe sometimes a little bit higher tenement houses along a pattern of streets and squares. So it was a modern style tenement houses, but built on a quite classic urban pattern. This situation with the border between port and the city lasted until 2003. Here you can see how these post-industrial and post-port areas were given back to the city. Of course, the city started to elaborate plans. Our city of Gdynia City Planning Office were elaborating local development plans and tried to elaborate the best waterfront as it was possible. And the idea was to create some high-rise iconic building and fluid continuation of typical modern pattern of streets and scales of buildings to this area. Mixed-use development with nice public spaces along the basins, along the piers, with famous architecture. Andrzej Kapuścik, Jem's architects, now under construction, as you can see. So next year, when you visit the city of Gdynia, you will be able to visit and feel it by yourself, how it works and how it will continue the public space system of the city of Gdynia city center. Then 6 years later, fishing pier, former fishing agency area was planned to be again continuation of typical modern pattern in the city of Gdynia with attractive public spaces, housing areas, services areas with interesting active edges along the piers. Some of them, a part of them is already built. You can see this housing area with the beautiful marina at the President's Basin. On the left, you can see the result of the competition, still waiting for realization, but step by step, this area is developed. Then we are getting a little bit further from the waterfront and still some closest neighborhood of the port. We have continuation of the same pattern as I told previously, with housing buildings with some services on the ground floor. Some of them, these two of them are already built. This on the right is not finished yet, but they are already developed. And the area between railway tracks and city center, of course, it was planned to be a continuation of typical modern Gdynia's quarters, together with very relying on sustainable mobility, with a nice pedestrian and cycling connection between Seaside Boulevard and the railway station as a backbone of this idea. The continuation of pattern of streets with some typical sustainable mobility related forms of streets. And it was a vision. This vision was created in 2017 as it was counted, and it is a possibility for 15,000 new inhabitants in this area. And again, in 2020, the boundaries between port and the city was changed. And as you can see, some part of the fishing pier and also some parts at the north side became a part of the port. And this is the reason why the state government decided to build the external port in Gdynia. So it influenced how the borders, of course, of the port. Our city of Gdynia City Planning Office has prepared the plans for everything. As you can see, the main axis is still and always have been in the city part of the city. The most important South Pier, the main compositional axis in the city. And this main compositional city, we all know that is under expectations of inhabitants and visitors. That's why our mayor of the city decided to organize a huge competition for studies and ideas for development of the main composition axis of Gdynia, called Pier of the Future. It was 2 years ago, and during last year we also had 2 other competitions for the closest neighborhood of this main axis. One was the competition for urban developing architectural and urban concept of Kościuszki Square, and then the second one, it was a competition for a concept of multifunctional building with some maritime tourism services at John Paul II Elim. First Pier of the Future, as I told, studies and ideas competition, very important historical axis in the city of Gdynia, and the competition results. First award, it is the idea of pedestrian path elevated to give the possibility to see the sea, because the construction of the breakwater enables to see the sea from the South Pier. This is to enable it. With this idea also gave some ideas for how to create some shelter for wind, against wind and sun and rain in this area. The second award was a reinterpretation of water. It was the idea of creating some water connections with some sculpture fountain, with some shallow water that could serve both during the winter and during the summer, and also reinterpreting a dry dock for submarine when the water was substituted by the greenery. And some honorable mention, very historical discipline, historically disciplined idea. Most of them, it was the competition for public space, so sustainable mobility was a key point, and enhancing the quality for pedestrians, for cyclists, were the very main point. And also how to create this area climate neutral. And a competition for developing some architectural and urban concept for the Kościuszki Square, and the first award, very interesting mixed-use complex of buildings that could create, or can create, it is just started to be built up. And it gives a possibility for very nice connections between South Pier and Marina. It creates a very, very nice possibility for public space, so you can sit and watch the marina, watch the sea, accompanied by some cafes and all nice places that are going to be elaborated. And the last competition, I had the great pleasure to be a judge in 2 of these competitions. It was a very, very nice experience. And the competition for developing a concept of multifunctional buildings designed for services, and the key point was also to create some maritime tourism services, because it's very common that all sailors are. This is a place where sailors come and fix their boats. So it was the key point to also to enable them a place for this kind of activities, also with some connections, and also to the South Pier, and also at the same time creating nice public spaces. And here all those competitions put together, as you can see, it all complete each other, and we hope to have it realized. And thank you very much. If you have any question, don't hesitate.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much, Paulina. Indeed, it was interesting, journey from the first district revitalization to the very complete plan. Very impressive, I must say again. And looks like wonderful plans for both citizens as well. You have marina industries there. One question there is regarding actually this, you've been planning different districts like a bit of separately. It was a continuous process. So do you see there were some challenges in connecting then those plans as you have started from the history from the first smaller district, and then modularly, I would say, move onwards with the plans, urban planning? Were there any challenges to connect then all this into one integral part of very interesting waterfront idea?
Yes, actually, there were many, very many challenges. But if you can see or you can feel that we made it separately, it's not true. It was just a kind of, let's say, realizing steps.
Okay.
Actually, we had the plan for everything. We worked on the whole city center area, and we worked on the whole city center's neighborhood area. We had the idea, but it was just a procedure that we made it step by step or area by area. But what's challenging, I think that this negotiating border line between port and cities is a very big challenge, because it's still changing, as you can see. So we must be very flexible in our planning and very resilient, because we have to be ready.
Absolutely.
We have to be ready for everything.
Yes.
So
yes.
as you can see, so this border is changing all the time, and yeah, it's very, very the most important thing to be flexible in planning and
yes,
have
absolutely.
a longer vision.
Absolutely. And of course, from the planning to implementation, there's quite some time. Usually that's the place where you start to localize it and adjust to the conditions and to the needs of the users later on. Absolutely. And I think we have still time for one more question that we received. Thank you for the presentation. And one question, is it a private development project in terms of investment? Or in other words, who invests in building those wonderful buildings?
These areas are not owned by the city, so the development is realized by private investors. So the plan was made by the city, and the land is not owned by the city, and the city is not realizing these buildings, apart from, of course, main public spaces.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Paulina. This was our last question. Yes, we wish you an well-implemented plans, because all looks like really, really attractive urban spaces for citizens. So thank you. And we will move on to the city of Riga to see how Riga is dealing with the street design manual. I think this is also some interesting tool for us to see and to learn from Riga. So Evelina, Ozola, I will give a floor. You're a chief designer in the city of Riga, and you will share with us the experiences of your city. Mike is yours.
Hello. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. I will try to go to my presentation now. Yes. Okay. So it's true. I'm the chief designer of the city, and I work at the Riga City Architect's Office. I will just in the beginning just shortly explain what we do and who we are. So we have it's a small division within the city department, the Department of Development. We're a small team of about seven people at the moment, and we have, let's say, three main directions that we work in. First of all, we are tasked with monitoring and promoting the quality of built environment. And we do this through a lot of consulting. So we look at a lot of projects that are going on in the city, and we give our opinion, and quite often ask for improvement and encourage designers and developers to come up with high quality solutions. We also do several research projects. We design ourselves sometimes, rather small scale permanent and temporary public space improvements. We organize competitions for public spaces, and we develop all kinds of guidelines. And the street manual is one part, the first chapter in those guidelines, I would say. The second part of our work, a large chunk of it, is we're working to improve planning, designing, and construction processes, and especially to improve cooperation between different stakeholders that sometimes don't communicate that well. So we are involved in developing a better model for public space governance in Riga. We sit on many advisory boards, task force groups, and we are also beginning to work on master plans for centers of neighborhoods in Riga, and also working on several strategies, for example, for public art in the city. So how to develop it, how to maintain everything, and coordinate a kind of even development of things. And then finally, we also have a sort of a communication and educational function. So we have to communicate quite a bit with the professionals that are working with the built environment, and as well as the general public, as people of Riga are very interested, and there's a lot of activist groups that show a very high interest in the development of public space in particular, and streets, especially streets. So we are constantly in dialogue with them, and we're also planning to launch an educational program this fall. As well as to promote architectural and public space achievements. So if something is done really well, then we make sure that everybody knows that this is the quality that we're looking for, and to use it as a good example. So about the street design manual, it is a tool, as you said. It is the first one that we have more or less completed now in a series of guidelines that we are planning, that altogether will form a system for designing public space in Riga. And since streets are form the most part of public space in the city, so this is where we started. We're also planning to keep developing this, all kinds of guidelines for streets to go into more detail. Also develop guidelines for greenery, for lighting, for urban furniture, and other elements that are important in public space. The goal, obviously, is to have a unified and sustainable and more safe urban environment. And especially when we're talking about the street design manual, so the intention was to create something that looks at street space more from the perspective of the pedestrian, from the needs of commercial and public enterprises that are present on the street, and not so much from the perspective of traffic planner, because that has been the dominant perspective until now. So this has to be a more kind of holistic view on street space. Now, this is a tool that should ideally help us streamline the designing, building, and maintenance processes to create a more kind of unified approach, so that not every project is made absolutely uniquely, devoting a lot of time and resources to designing and building, and then afterwards maintenance is also more difficult if every street is completely different. So obviously we're looking for something that is more uniform. The street design manual was done in close collaboration with Umeå architects, a young architectural office practice in Riga. So we outsourced most of the work to them. So they did all of the drawings, and they were an enormous help for us. And the intention is that the street manual can be used for both existing streets when they are being renovated, as well as for new streets that are not yet built in the city. So that would be in the case of creating new neighborhoods. So the work began by analyzing the existing fabric of Riga, looking at the streets, at their widths, their physical widths, as well as their legal lines, the so-called red lines that mark the borders of the street, the type of buildings that are near the streets. Are they right on the border of the streets, or a bit farther away? Like, how big is the space? How is it being used? What's the intensity of traffic? What's the intensity of pedestrian flows? How the ground floor is being used, and so on. And so a lot of kind of typologies were already quite clearly visible from this analysis. Also, we did not look at the whole city yet, so we focused on the areas that kind of require solutions most urgently. That was the majority of the historical center, but excluding the old town, which is a very specific area. Then we looked at the large-scale housing areas that will be built during the Soviet era, and at the a bit older historical neighborhoods that are mostly low-rise buildings, also mostly residential. Then from this analysis, a matrix was developed. So how can we put all of the different streets that we have within one system and see the different categories that there are? So in this matrix, I think this is also quite a common thing that a lot of cities do. So this is not very unique for Riga. We also looked at a lot of examples of cities that have done manuals like this in the recent years, or in the last decades, let's say. So, for instance, Oslo and Copenhagen were great examples for us. And in this matrix, which is, I think, a lot of cities share this kind of approach, we have on the horizontal axis is the traffic intensity, which the current categorization of streets is also based on. And then on the vertical axis, we have the urban activity, which is then measured by looking at the pedestrian flows and the use of a ground floor, whether there are a lot of entrances, commercial activities, public spaces, and so on. So let's say in the left top corner of this matrix, you would have a very low traffic intensity street that is very small and local, and perhaps doesn't have a lot of commercial activity, but is important locally. It could be in a residential or another type of monofunctional area. And then as we move to the right and the bottom corner of the matrix, you would have a street where traffic plays a very big role. So it's a big connection, an important connection for the city, but it also has a lot of public and commercial activity around it. So a lot of different functions and spaces should fit into the street profile there. And then this is like the kind of finished version of the matrix. So this is still kind of in theory. And then this is all the possible solutions, all the street profiles drawn out in detail. And there the matrix becomes more complicated because it involves then different categories of widths of the street. So from 4 to 3 different types for each of the cells of the matrix. So altogether we would have, I think it's 33 different street profiles. And then within those 33 types and profiles, there's still a bit of variation because the widths vary. And what we have done there is defined priorities for each type of street. So some of them, for some of them, if there's a possibility to increase the width of something, then those should be the pedestrian areas that get the extra space. For some of them, let's say greenery is more important, while for others, then traffic really is the kind of the determining factor and gets all the space that it needs to function properly. And perhaps then pedestrian or commercial activity is not as important because it's just not that type of street. So yeah, and then just to kind of build it as a system, we developed a kind of a street constructor, you could say. So defined all of the different little zones that go into each street, and all of them have their specific parameters. I have to say, this is all, this is not new information. This is based on existing regulation and planning documents. So all of the widths have more or less been already defined. The only difference is that the manual provides a more illustrated approach to this. So this is really, the aim was to have a very highly visual document that is very easy to use. So it is also a tool for communication. And this is something that not only people who are professionals like road engineers and public space designers and architects can use. This is also to explain how a street is constructed for the people who live there, for example. So the visual language is quite simple. It's quite attractive with the kind of color coded to explain, to make it more simple and more explanatory. So yeah, so all of the different possibilities for each of the areas is explained, for example, like what a pedestrian needs, what a cyclist needs, public transportation with all the lane widths and the different configuration of public transport stops, how much space plantings require on the street, and so on and so on. So lots of pages of this. And then all the different street types were also drawn out in detail with explanations of what are the variables in each street and which are the parts that always remain a constant and just don't have that kind of variation. So again, a lot of, I think, yeah, 33 different types of streets were drawn with all the possible variations looked at. Intersections as well. So how all the different categories meet and what should be the best way to design an intersection with streets that have different roles within the city. And here again, we focused more on the public space, the needs of pedestrians, cyclists, and all kinds of commercial activities and greenery in the city, and did not look so much into proper traffic solutions because that is something that is already more or less common knowledge. For the intersections, a 3D model was also made to better explain how everything is organized. And then as a suggestion for materials to be used on different kinds of streets were also made. So this is also a matrix. We love making matrices for everything. So here again, this is not on a very detailed level yet. That will be the next step for us. But here, just a very simple explanation of all the different types of paving that should be used, because a lot of activity is going on in Riga. A lot of streets are being renovated and new streets are being built. And it's quite important to ensure that they are more or less follow the same standard right now, because we don't have a lot of time to adjust all of the projects that are already in the pipeline. So this is a kind of a very simple first version of the different materials and the ways that they should be used in the city. Now, what are we planning to do next? So at the moment we are testing this material, so it is not public yet. it does require, well, we need to be sure that it doesn't have mistakes or solutions that wouldn't work. So we are kind of trying out all the different types on the map of Riga. What makes it quite complicated is that obviously not all streets are the same throughout their whole length. So they have different sections with kind of varying roles within the city and the neighborhoods. So there's streets that are longer that run through several neighborhoods that can have that can go through like 3 to 5 different categories from this matrix. So we're making sure that all of this works, also consulting a lot with colleagues in the development department as well as the traffic department. So they have gone through the material and made little notes that we are now working on and kind of making the next version of the design manual. And then obviously the main challenge is to get everyone to use it. The hope is that this is a material that is easy to use, that it is really needed, and it makes everyone's work easier. So everyone would be motivated to use it, and not that it should not be made mandatory to use it. So we are obviously looking also for some kind of formalization for approval from the city council and the bodies that are responsible for preserving heritage in the city center and so on. But the goal is to create a document that is really attractive and easy to use so that people would be interested in using it. And the main users obviously are going to be people designing streets, so engineers, architects, and so on. Then the next chapter in the series is going to be rather detailed drawings of street profiles. So right now we have kept them on a kind of diagrammatic level. We need to go into more details to look at the materials more closely, to little details, all the little stones and everything separating the different areas, and looking more at the kind of visual design of things, the colors and the tactility and so on. And then also something that we left out at the moment is all the exceptions. So streets that are very special in some regard, for instance, streets that are on waterfronts, or big boulevards, also streets that have tram tracks on them. There's quite a large variety. We have to look into more detail there. And then this will be followed by more manuals for greenery, lighting, street furniture, and all the other aspects that are there that make streets and public space look the way it is and that give city its character. So this is where we are. Thank you very much for listening to this. And I hope there will be some questions.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Evelina. Indeed, very interesting tool. And actually, yeah, for me as well, as a user of the street, both, as a pedestrian as well with a car, I think it was really interesting to listen to this, that you can exactly look at the street from different perspective and actually change the influence on the design. I think like on a single street, as you said, also some fractions of the street can be of different use. I remember discussions we had here in Turku when we have tried to test, for example, changing the purpose of the street and closing some street for the cars, opening for pedestrians. So this is always quite questionable. Ambitious also, but I hope, yes, it goes fine. As you said, now you are at the testing of it, and there was one question, of course, about this. How do you plan to make it more, not obligatory probably, but mainstream it in some sort of legal procedure so that it's used officially in the city, in the departments for planning? But you said that you are discussing it. Of course, you don't want to force to have it obligatory, but I guess in order to have it as official tool in use, you would need to make some effort, right? How do you see it? Will it be difficult to get it as official procedure?
So far, no. It seems that it is going to not be that difficult. That this is apparently a document that everyone has been waiting for quite a while. And it's very clear that this is needed. And there isn't much to be, discussed or argued about, because it is based on existing planning documents and regulations. And all it does, it introduces a kind of a different perspective on those rules and regulations. And it does not present something that contradicts what we have been using so far. It kind of rearranges and creates a system, a very clear system to be used. So it seems that it's going to go quite well. We're already in the talks about how the procedures should go, how it's going to be formalized. And then obviously I think we need a couple of pilot projects where we can test this out on real design projects. And the hope is that it's going to be used as a reference. So when the traffic department, for instance, hands out technical regulations to those designing, it would refer to this book and say, this is the type of profile that you should be using for the street. So kind of less writing, more illustration for them, I suppose. Yeah, so that's the idea, that we have something that is attractive enough and easy enough to be used voluntarily, not only because it's a regulation.
Of course. And how do you, one more question, follow-up question on the possible transfer of this tool elsewhere in our region to other cities. Will it be translated also in English, into English? And, the manual itself as well, it's a very localized tool, but manual and the tool, will it be available openly later on?
Yeah, absolutely. It is already translated to English, and it's going to be published online so that everyone can access. And I think this is really important to create a kind of a shared knowledge in the region. So, for instance, the Oslo public space, or also it's called a street manual, I think it helped us enormously because it was there, it was available, it was completely in English, and we saw the similarities between our cities there. And so it is kind of a universal language of drawing and all of these little details of streets that we use. And so definitely it's going to be there. And I think these documents are really a great way to learn from each other. And then I think we look at them online, and then the next step is to meet in person and to discuss what works and what doesn't. Yeah. And how the reality follows the drawings.
Great. So we look very much forward to meeting you actually in Turku and looking at the Turku, at least one of the streets that Turku wants to rebuild and to replan, especially. Maybe we can make a first testing of the tool elsewhere than in Riga. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Evelina. And I will now give the floor to our next speaker, Harry Bertilsson, head of the urban planning unit at the city of Umeå, with his presentation on social sustainability as structuring pillar for urban development in Umeå. Harry, please, the floor is yours.
Hi, first and foremost, thank you for having me, and thanks for the invitation. I'm just going to make sure here that you see my pictures. So in my presentation, I have not focused on the waterfront areas, even though Umeå as well has a few exciting projects that I gladly can come back and talk about another time. I focused more on the general approaches to the revitalization and making urban space attractive for citizens, and ensuring that urban planning is done sustainable from a social point of view. So maybe I'm sorry in advance here if someone was hoping for cool views of the new planning projects in different areas of Umeå. My focus will be on something as sexy as a strategic planning document and the background to how it was created. Well, anyway, my name is Harry Bertilsson. I'm head of urban planning at Umeå kommun, and I'm going to show you a few slides about this and how social sustainability is an integrated part of our planning in Umeå. And we are quite proud that we were nominated for the Architectural Gala in 2022 for Best Planning Prize. Sadly, we didn't win. Some city called Stockholm swooped in and snatched the prize from us, but better luck next time, I guess. So this is basically the ground level for our planning. This is Umeå's long-term goal that is directorial to all succeeding work. This is the political goal for the municipality's urban growth. The municipalities now has around 130,000 citizens and around 90,000 in the city of Umeå, and is expected to grow to 200,000 by the time of 2050. And in our general plan for urban development, this long-term goal is answered through 6 growth strategies. I won't translate them here today one by one, but they basically head us in the direction for urban densification, which leads to closeness in the city of everything: service, work, friends, culture, and so on. And that leads us to sustainable transport choices. So far, so good. These are our long-term goals. We now know where we're heading as a municipality and in which direction the organization is supposed to go. But these are only visions and goals. How do we break them down so it can be applicable in the everyday work? Well, this is maybe the point of departure here for what I wanted to share with you today. If new developments doesn't benefit their surroundings, they do not really make sense to the people already living in the city. Umeå's long-term development strategy is based on densification, which means that most of the new developments will be located where people already live. So how do I, as a citizen, get affected by this new development? What positive can possibly come out of the development? And the question we asked ourselves is there a way to analyze this and explain it to our citizens in a better way? And the answer is yes, at least we think so. So social sustainability is researched by a wide range of disciplines. On the one hand, based on variables linked to the person, social economic factors. On the other, based on location-specific factors, the spatial factors. And then research also mentions a third field that is related to both of these, the belonging, the connection to the place, the sense of place. So to answer the question, we studied the city of Umeå through a methodology that consists of 3 parts. It's mostly Swedish here, but on the bottom you can see the 3 dimensions of the analysis: the socioeconomic quantitative analysis, the emotional connection to the place, the sense of place, and the qualitative data collection and analysis. And this is an example of the quantitative data, and I know it's a pretty ugly slide here, but you're not really supposed to be able to read this. I just kind of popped it in to show you the quantitative analysis and that it's based primarily on already known statistics about the municipality of Umeå. So strong blue and strong red frames indicates a deviation, and the lighter colors indicates that it's closer to average. So for example, the proportion of residents with higher education is higher than average in the city district of Berghem, where I happen to live, than, for example, in the district of Ersboda, where my niece, who just moved from home, live. So this is the analysis and how we used it and how we made it visible in the document. And the qualitative analysis was done through spatial analysis based on knowledge within the organization about the specific location. through a number of questions, but it was also based on dialogue with the citizens. We had a mobile dialogue bike in which we rode around the various city districts and collected information about what residents and visitors think of the neighborhood through face-to-face interaction. And then we also received about 5,500 responses from digital dialoguers. And the analysis could be used. It's of course qualitative, but the results can be quantifiable. So the result of these different analyses undergo balanced analysis and end up in a planning document, which is this one, Umeå districts, how are they doing? Or more correct, this is how they're doing, because now we know. So in the material, we now have a good knowledge of how a district is doing in a consolidated and concise way. We have a statistic that and a graphic that shows us what the city district consists of right now. And if we know what it consists of right now, we also know what it doesn't consist of, as well as the analysis part that is based to a greater extent on experiences. What do people in the city district think of their part of town? What do they appreciate and what are they missing? And consolidated, this ends up in an urban spatial analysis that both describe the content of the area and what is missing, what is needed in the city district. And somewhere around here, you might be able to land in what we call value creating community planning. And I do not mean in economic terms, even though prices tend to follow upwards. What I mean is that new buildings must benefit their surroundings and create value for the people that already live there. What we in Umeå now have is an assembled material that shows us how things are in the city districts and what the next project should contain to be a value creating addition. We can, based on the citizens' wishes and needs and through statistics, adjust the content of the development project so it better responds to the needs and through that also justify the project for the citizens already living in the neighborhood or in the district. And in the long run, get a more social sustainable city. At least that is our aim for the future, of course. And when I held this presentation a while ago for our politicians, someone asked me to like pick one key factor for success, which I do not really believe in. You need to study and work with the entire spectrum. But if I'm forced to highlight one specific factor, I would say the socio-economic mix. Umeå is the biggest city in Sweden that do not experience socio-economic disturbance as it is labeled by the police. And one explanation for that is that Umeå has a long tradition of mixing household types and making possible for different conditions for living in the same city district. If there, for example, is a deficit of renting household in a specific district, that is what we prioritize and plan for in the next project. And this is not a strategy to build for like poor people in rich areas, but a strategy to always add what is underrepresented. And it is equally important to enable for people to stay in the same area or district when your conditions for life changes, to have a residential or housing career in your own area and to prevent brain drain in areas that have socioeconomic challenges, for example. And we will only be able to make these changes at the rate of the trust that we have in our community. And in Umeå, our study shows that we have a high level of trust between people and in institutions. And we need to have the citizens on board to be able to make the changes that is necessary to meet the complex issues at hand for a sustainable future, and not only sustainable in terms of social sustainability, but all the other factors as well. There are great challenges combined with climate change, for example, which can affect people already living in the city when you make changes. So social sustainability can be elusive, which is why it requires creativity and collaboration, and the knowledge that social sustainability is not something that you build in one single place where it's lacking. It has to be studied from a holistic viewpoint and be built in an integrated way throughout the city. And that's it for me. So thank you, tack så mycket. And if there's any questions, please ask now or contact me via the email address at the bottom corner here.
Thank you so much, Harry, for this very important, bringing actually this very important aspect of also social sustainability, and actually the strategic approach to building up this social sustainability and trust. And I think for every city, we all agree that this citizen-centered planning is essence, and it's very important, and that trend from now going on also in the future. So it was very also impressive, your analysis, and I think for your politicians as well, that you have had an evidence as well that a certain directions in the urban planning, taking into account strongly the social aspects, are important, so that you can build better inclusive societies, more vibrant communities, so to say. Actually, I see no question. So I think with this, thank you so much, Harry.
Thank you.
And I think at this point, I would like to thank you as well to all our presenters for very interesting insights into various aspects of urban sustainability and urban planning. This gave us a great teasers, I think, for our commission meeting in the autumn. Once again, I would like to invite everyone to the Joint Commission and UBC Sustainable Cities and Planning Cities Commission that will be organized in autumn, 13-15 September. So this was just to start the discussion, and I hope to see all our speakers here in Turku continuing on those important topics. We had today very limited time, but I hope that more discussions come in autumn, as we all are here in Turku. So thank you so much for your participation. Thank you for our audience, and once again for our speakers for being here with us today. As I mentioned, the recording from that webinar and the presentations will be available on our website. So please check it, and in case you have had no time to be in the seminar and in the previous ones, please follow us for more on our website and social media. But thank you once again, and have a good end of the week. Thank you, and bye-bye.